Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our final LEAP session of 2025. And I thought it would be fitting to end the year on a kind of a reminder note. This is basically reminders to finish strong in 2025 and starting strong in 2026. So there's probably not a lot here that you haven't heard before. You probably heard a lot of it from me, but I think it's if you're anything like me, it helps to be reminded of things once in a while. And I like to do that a couple times a year. Once at the end of the year, I like to plan for the next year. And I call it spring cleaning. I clean out all my thoughts and so forth. And so I thought that finishing the year with a bunch of reminders would be good for everybody to just kind of get ready for a great 2026. When I think about how do I finish sales strong, how do I start the year strong, I talk about the big three kind of numbers or activities that work together to build a strong store. And for me, collections, account retention is kind of the basis of everything. Inventory control, super important for a profitable store. And then, of course, sales, sales, sales. We're always trying to drive sales growth. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on collections, what we call account retention at Majik, a little bit of time on inventory control, and then probably a little more time on sales reminders and kind of tips to just remember in the coming year and to finish out this year. One thing, I'm going to move this here. I hate when my picture gets in the way of everything. Account retention is what we call it because that's our goal. We want to keep the customers. We're not looking to collect and lose customers if we can possibly avoid it. And so we like to provide customers with options versus ultimatums. So many times when we say, I need $80 by 4 o'clock today, or we're going to pick up your stuff, even if the customer could give us that $80, our tone of voice, our one option for them can sometimes drive them back and have them start avoiding us. And so we try and give them options. And to do that, I think what we developed a number of years ago is kind of this idea of categorizing past due customers. So whenever I talk at Majik about a number one customer, we know that that's someone who really wants to pay, but they have a short-term problem. And you can probably list 20 examples for this. I'll just list a couple here. Maybe they were off work for a couple days. Maybe they have a minor car repair that costs a couple $100s, that type of thing. So it's a short-term problem. It's only really going to impact them maybe this week, maybe next week, but then they're going to be back on their feet. And so what options make sense to help them here? And the option I would start with would be, can you just pay me a double payment next week? And that's what we hope for because everyone's happy then, right? If they can't make a double payment, then maybe another option I would offer them is give me a payment plus a half a payment next week, and then another payment and a half a payment the following week. And if that doesn't work, then we go to the old standby, which is free time. We have other options too. We could hold it for you for a week, that type of thing. But free time we use very sparingly in this scenario. We try to let them know that we can only do it every once in a blue moon. So this might be the only time I can give you free time. So I just want to be sure you can't pay me that double payment or that payment and a half. But long story short, any one of those fixes, those options, would get them back on track for the following week. When we talk to a customer, and again, one of the things you want to do is you need to have a conversation with the customer to learn, what their problem is. So customer calls and says, I can't pay. This is where we ask a couple of those questions. Hey, I want to help you to do that. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about what's going on? And through that is where you learn which of these customers they are. So that number two customer is someone who has a longer term problem. Maybe they lost their job and now they're having to work on, they're collecting unemployment. Maybe they need a new car and now that's going to cost them another $500 or $600 a month. So that's a longer term problem. It's maybe a permanent problem in terms of the new car because that's going to be a multi-year payment plan. So if I give them free time or if I have them pay a double payment next week, I know that that's just a short-term solution for a longer-term problem, and probably in another week or two after they juggle some other payments, they're going to have the same problem. So my goal with that number two customer is to really work with them on their new budget, right? What can they afford to pay us, and how can we help them get to that amount? It might be a matter of returning a couple of agreements. It might be a matter of downsizing from a 86-inch TV to a 55-inch TV, or kind of some kind of a situation where we're working with them, just getting their payments in line. And our goal at all times is to remind them we want to get you to pay off, but sometimes we might have to pick up a couple items for the time being until you're back on track, until maybe you can pay off one or two of the other ones. So number three customer is someone who kind of just is paying what they want when they want, and they're really hard to work with. We've all had them, right? They're coming in, take it or leave it, take my $80, or we're pounding on their door for 2 weeks, and finally they answer and hand us some money. I think it's really important to set the expectations with these people when you do get them, which many times is when they're coming in to rent something new from you, right? So we're struggling. We're kind of squeezing money out of them here and there, and finally they come in and they say, "I need a PS5 for my son for Christmas," and that's when we sit them down and explain to them, "Well, I really might not be able to help you because of this situation." And so I reset the expectations. Maybe I get them to re-sign an agreement for their other agreements that says it's kind of a last and final option. It explains to them that we need to pick up the merchandise if they don't make it easier on us. And then sometimes we do actually have to pick it up. And sometimes you have these situations where a customer says, "Well, pick it up, but I can pay you Friday." And in some situations with this type of a customer, I think it's important to go ahead and do that, right? So maybe I pick up a bedroom suit on Monday, they come in Friday and pay me, and then I re-deliver it to them. I know that's a lot of work, but it kind of sets the tone that I'm willing to pick it up from them. I don't mind losing them as a customer if they don't work with me a little more, like a little more fairly, I guess you would say. And then the number four customer is that customer who's just a skip customer. They want to keep it. They don't want to pay. And of course, there your company has options on what we're allowed to do, what we're supposed to do in terms of trying to pick up that merchandise. A couple of things I would mention is this number two customer. It's really important to ask the right questions, because if you misunderstand and you think that the number two customer is actually a short-term problem, you can turn them into a number three customer, because they'll get tired of constantly having to talk to you because you really haven't done the hard work of setting the real expectations of the new budget with them. So be careful of that. And then the other one that I have labeled here is, don't let a service issue become a collection issue. This time of the year, right, we're super busy with deliveries, we're super busy with sales. Let's not forget about those service issues. Customer has a recliner that doesn't recline. They're really going to be frustrated at having to pay week in and week out when we haven't resolved their problem for them. If they have, other items that just aren't working the way they're supposed to, they're going to get frustrated paying for it, and continuously reminding you of that repair issue. And eventually they're going to turn into that number three customer that just says, "Look, I'm not paying you anymore," or I've paid you enough on this agreement, that type of thing. And then just kind of going back to the beginning, when you rent in a rental agreement, it's really important, in my opinion, to explain to them the pain points, right? I think it goes a long way to make sure every new customer, every new rental understands that if you run into an income problem, you run into some of those situations we talked about. If you run into that, please call me, because I want you to own this. And the only way I can help you own it is if you contact me and let me know you're going to have a payment problem. And here, by the way, this is our collection person. Dan's going to help you sometimes if I'm not available. So you can call me, your salesperson, or you can call the other Dan over here, who's your account retention specialist. And one of us will help you. We'll give you options if you run into a payment problem. So I think the conversations, the options, that's the important thing I'm trying to get at here. Moving on to inventory, right? This time of the year, inventory, our hope is that we're moving through it all, right? We're getting everything pre-rented out the door. We're moving through a lot of new inventory. And one of the most important ways to prevent having a lot of used inventory in your store is to just prevent returns through that quality account retention, right? Instead of a customer's 3 days late, I'm not going to pick it up. I'm going to work with them to try and figure out how to get them caught up. But once we do get it back, sometimes what happens is we might have minor service issues, and things tend to get kind of stuck in corners or stuck on shelves, under the counter in the manager's office, wherever it is. And so I think it's very important to stay focused on that pre-rented merchandise. I would encourage a weekly walkthrough, whether it's the manager and the sales specialist, or we have what we call an ops specialist that kind of focuses on that stuff. So maybe they make sure that everything in those corners of the back room is being addressed. So a lot of times they're like minor service issues. They're things that we just didn't want to deal with, but it really is something that could be quickly dealt with and gotten back out on the floor. Is everything priced right? I know sometimes I'll walk into a store and there might be this beautiful stainless steel refrigerator on the sales floor, but there's this big dent in the front of it, and you look at the price tag, and it's only discounted a few percent, maybe 10% because it's only rented for 3 or 4 weeks. It's very important that that door gets replaced, or if not, if you're going to try and sell it in that condition or rent it in that condition, make sure it's discounted appropriately. Most people in their main kitchen do not want a refrigerator with a dent in the front of it, so you have to price it appropriately. So are they priced right? Is it tagged right? Is it stuck in the back room, like I mentioned? Is it refurbished properly? Is there something we can do with just a little bit of time and effort to make this present way better than what it does now? And then the thing we need to ask ourselves too is it even rentable, right? So, I've been in stores where there's maybe a sectional or something, and it has, just some stains. Maybe the customer worked in a shop and would come home and plop down with greasy jeans or something on, and that grease, just over the time embeds itself. But we tried to refurbish it. It just didn't come out, and it's still on that floor. Sometimes, you can maybe sell that for $100 if the right person walks through the door, but you also have to consider the value of your floor space, right? If I'm paying 10 or $15 a square foot for my store, that sectional or that sofa set probably is costing me $150 per week, or per month, I should say, to sit there. So I'm better off disposing of that, getting something new in that I can rent, 3 and 4 of them in a month, rather than having one sit there for 3 or 4 months and costing me that rent money that could be better utilized. And then just making sure your whole team has that move it or lose it mentality. So obviously our goal is, as soon as something comes back pre-rented, we're going to try and get it back out on the floor and get it rented as soon as possible. But for those things that do get to 90 days idle, or maybe your company has a 60-day policy, whatever your policy is, where you're like really looking hard at that, commit to it, right? So, I suggest taking the oldest 3 items in your store and taking the highest cost 3 items and just making that kind of like a target for the week. Let's rent these 6 things come hell or high water. We're going to rent these 6 things this week, and do that every week. And if we're also in the habit of minimizing the items that are getting to that 90-day point, we should really have very few 90-day items in our store. So you may need to clean it, you may need to rearrange it, you may need to add it to a bundle, discount it, but really in the end, just do something to move that stuff. I've been notoriously cheap with that, where I hate to discount stuff. But if you've tried, everything else in the last 30 days and nothing's happening, then maybe you just need to discount it and move it out. And make sure, you include the entire team in the process. If everyone knows about those 6 items, or maybe you have a method for letting them know that every item that has 90-day idle has a dot on it or something like that. Make sure everyone knows about it and everyone can talk it up. And then finally, once you've kind of maximized how you're managing your pre-rented inventory, don't forget about that stuff that moves fast, right? So this time of the year, still PS5s are renting, Switch 2s are renting. If you don't have them, get them. And I always try to make sure, it's natural for the inexpensive product to move faster, right? So if I have a $19.99 laundry set, for example, they're probably going to rent really quickly. It's important to make sure you're replenishing that. Obviously, you're trying to upsell everyone to your $29.99 laundry, But in the meantime, if you don't have the 1999 laundry, customer might come in and think that you're overpriced, or your cheapest set is only 29 or $34 or whatever it is. So make sure you're replenishing your merchandise at all times. Um, Whatever your top selling items are, make sure you have them on order. And then finally, so we have account retention, we have merchandise in the store. Then, let's focus on sales, right? Especially this time of the year. Sometimes we can shortcut because we have so many sales coming in, but why not try and maximize what we have? And then as we flow into January, which can be a little bit slower on sales, let's maximize those leads that we acquired in December. So make sure that everyone who's involved in your sales process understands the sales funnel, right? First step is acquiring leads. Second step, trying to convert those leads into sales. Third step, asking for the close and getting it rented. And then the fourth step is re-renting to those same customers over and over again. So step one, capturing leads. I think most of us probably have access to a CRM, customer relationship manager. If you're on a Wow Brands website, they have one. If you're on Versarent, they have one. I'm guessing Synergy probably has one. I can't speak to that 100% certainty. But even if not, there are free ones available, free CRMs that you can use. And that helps you track your customers, helps you keep track of these leads that I'm talking about. If you don't have a CRM, then use Excel, your spreadsheet, or just use a notebook. Use anything. But make sure you're capturing these leads and tracking them. Different types of leads. Just to mention is anyone that's in the store. If they don't rent, make sure you have their follow-up information. Anyone that is on a phone call, make sure you have their callback information. Anyone on your website, Facebook, they're submitting leads all the time. Make sure you have that information captured in your CRM or on that in that notebook. And then, if you don't have incoming leads, you have all your past leads from the past, how many ever years you've been in business, past customers. We always go back at least 3 years. We call past customers one agreement customers. Any customer who's not struggling to pay can afford more. And this is the time of the year you want to rent to them because and they know that they have their tax refund coming in February. So even if they're struggling a little bit to pay, we know they can afford maybe one or two more agreements from us. The thing I would stress, and I know it's something we struggle with, is prioritizing the leads. Right? I would refer to these as hot leads. Which ones are most time sensitive? Obviously, a customer in the store right now. You want to make sure your staff isn't too busy making phone calls to get customers in the store to deal with the customer in the store. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from people who have walked through a store a few times because the staff was busy doing other things. Should never happen. Does your phone ever go to voicemail? If you have a customer calling you, someone needs to answer it. Someone needs to help that customer right now. Right? That's a hot lead. The one that's I think misunderstood the most though is how about a customer that's on their computer right now? How about a customer who just put in a lead? In my opinion, that's as hot as a phone lead or as an in-store lead, and we need to treat them that way. So if you don't have someone kind of hovering over that computer that tells them when there's a lead or it alerts them when there's a new lead on their phone, and their expectation is to contact that person right away, I think that's a huge missed opportunity. So as soon as a lead comes in, we're texting them, we're emailing them, we're calling them. Remember that someone who's on the computer putting in a lead probably prefers to be contacted by email or by text, not by a phone call. I would still call them, but I think I would first text them and email them and try and communicate with them that way. But then at the same time, I'm leaving them a message because they're not going to answer probably. And I'm going to say, hey, I got your lead. I want to let you know I sent you my email. I sent you my text information. I'd love to get this delivered to you, that type of thing. So we're making sure that we're contacting them how they want to be contacted. And then definitely we're going to use all means of contact. If you run out of hot leads, right? So I don't have any customers, I don't have any phone calls, and I've handled all the web leads for the first time. That's where the CRM comes in handy because we want to keep contacting those web leads until we get a hold of them, right? At least a few times that first couple of hours. until we can reach them, and then more in the days to come. We have all the leads that we captured from, today, from yesterday, from last week, and so on. So we can constantly be working that funnel, the leads we have, and turning those into potential rentals. And again, remember when you're calling, it should not be robotic, right? Just make sure you're sounding curious. You're asking, you're letting them know that you're here to help. You're not just a super ultra overly professional salesperson calling them and leaving this very professional sounding message. I know that sounds weird, but like I'm sure you've all got them, right? Like, this is Dan Fisher. I'm calling about the lead you submitted on our website. Please give me a call back at 717-368, blah, 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 blah. Rather than that, be friendly, right, is what I would try to say. And then finally, that third level of the sales funnel is a pretty easy one, right? Ask for the sale. So many of us, especially us introverts, we tend to want to talk to them to death. We're telling them about all the features. We're telling them everything we know, and really early on in this process, once we've asked them questions to determine what they need, and once we've talked to them about answered any questions they have, then we present to them, I think this is the right one for you. Are you ready to set up the agreement, and we can get that out to you, as soon as you need it, that type of thing. So don't hesitate to ask for the sale. It's amazing how often that can cut a 1 hour sales process down to 15 minutes, and the customer probably appreciates that too. The customer really doesn't want to hear an hour's worth of conversation if they've already made up their mind. So don't forget that you may lose a customer because you're over informing them about things they don't care about. And then again, just some basics. I already mentioned it. Make sure you have the products you need, right? Refurb the merchandise, have it available for sale. And then this is one that it's funny. I just saw this on the Trib website, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I talk about it often. It's delivery scheduling. We tend to be delivered kind of booked out for 2, 3, 4 days sometimes, and that costs us sales. I'm certain of it. And so using we've used Google Calendar for years for delivery scheduling, but that doesn't really solve our problem. Our problem is that we can sometimes zigzag around town because our scheduling is not grouped together properly. So unless it's an emergency for this customer, I'm going to try and put them in a group with other customers that are on their side of town. It might be tomorrow, late tomorrow, where I have a delivery on the east side of town. And then we're going to leave some space open so that if another delivery comes on that side of town, I'm going to group them together. And I feel like we can add 2 or 3 deliveries a day to our delivery schedules by grouping those together and by being more efficient with it. So, I was just at a Trib board meeting not too long ago, and a couple of the board members were adamant about the concept of, if you can't deliver it today or tomorrow, you are losing sales. And I was convicted by that because I do believe that we're typically not able to do that, and I do believe we lose sales for that. So I think it's really, really important to remember that and figure out that, and I think it's a training thing. So training your whoever is scheduling your deliveries, how to group those a little better, and how to ask the customer, when do you need this? Can we bring it to you tomorrow? Doesn't have to be today, in many cases. And then just some other sales basics, events. I think one of the ways we can compete against the larger national competitors is through small local events. Make our customers feel special. Have friends and family events where you're celebrating your customers in front of their friends and family, and then hopefully getting some new customers that way. Referral bonuses. I think most of us would agree that our customers love us. Don't forget to ask them to refer their friends and families. We offer a bonus for that. I think it always helps to offer money. Makes them more willing to do so. But I think a lot of them would just do it if you asked. And then finally, don't forget about packages. Customers love value. Your team members love the idea of selling a package because it helps them make their numbers, and it's easier to do, right? One thing I didn't mention about idle inventory that I meant to was, if you have some like cocktail tables or lamps or all those miscellaneous things that do tend to sit around a little longer, putting those in packages with hotter selling, sofa sets or whatever, is a great way to move some of that older idle inventory that, maybe isn't going to sell on its own. So just reminders there. And And then finally, before I wrap it up, just a few bonus leadership tips. Because again, the leader is the one that drives all this, and so some ways you can help drive these things to happen is daily huddles, right? Every morning, make sure you have maybe a team priority goal and then an individual goal for each person on the team, whichever one of these areas they can impact the most. Um, make sure there's a scoreboard and it's updated daily. Whatever whatever's important to you right now, make sure you're updating it daily and make sure it's visible to everyone on the team and make sure they know what the goal is. It's amazing how that works, even if there's no prize at the end of the tunnel, right? It's nice to have a team lunch or something as a prize, but even if there's no prize, a scoreboard makes a difference. And then end of the day debrief. So what did we do great today? What did we miss out on? What's our number one focus for tomorrow? And again, it doesn't have to be a 15-minute meeting. In fact, I think that would be a negative, but just brief, honest, productive, maybe as each person's leaving or maybe as a team huddle, depending on how you guys depart. But just talking about making sure tomorrow is off to a great start by starting it the night before. So hopefully that gives you kind of a brief rundown of some things to remember to finish your year strong and and start next year strong. So I will open it up to. I don't know that there's any. I'm going to open it up to questions if anyone has any comments, and I'll leave it open for a minute or so, and then we'll let you get back to finishing the year strong.